pleased to introduce our speaker, Dr. Marion Broom. Dr. Broom is the Dean and Ruby Wilson Professor of Nursing at Duke University School of Nursing, the Vice Chancellor for Nursing Affairs at Duke University, and the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs for Nursing at the Duke University Health System. In addition, she is the Editor-in-Chief of Nursing Outlook, the official journal of the American Academy of Nursing, and the Council for the Advancement of Nursing Science. Dr. Broom has been a Fellow of the American Academy of Nursing since 1994 and was inducted into Sigma Theta Tau International Researcher Hall of Fame in 2010. The title of Dr. Broom's presentation is Fearless Leadership, Using Nursing Science to Improve Health. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Broom.
Okay, that's what I thought. Good morning. I'm also an Army nurse, retired. I spent 20 years, got that 20-year letter, and then had another job, so I did retire. But and so I'll say to you, happy, or not happy Veterans Day, how can you say that? But I think tomorrow we have a lot to be grateful for. I hope we continue to have a lot to be grateful for, but especially for the service, and I mean that you all give every day. My premise for this talk is that I truly do believe it's a time for nursing science, and that it is the unique role of nurse leaders in all areas to co-lead health outcomes improvement initiatives. However, I think to do that, we've got to change a few things. I think we have to mobilize our knowledge, analytic abilities, expertise, and most importantly, the public's trust, which we have. We have been, with the exception of 1 year since 2000, named the most trusted professionals in the country. And we have to do this in partnership now with our patients and families and communities that we serve. Now, when I wrote this in uncertain times on Saturday, I had no idea. I really did not. That leading is fraught with anxiety. I have had several emails myself from Duke University this morning, and there's all kinds of things happening in our part of the country, and as a leader, I'm expected to say something about that to my community, and I will. But nursing has a long legacy of speaking out and speaking up and advocating for. And I think we have to use our knowledge and our science to be able to improve health in this country. Because frankly, if not us, then who will do that? Now, I also know, just a little caveat, I hate to have speakers come and talk to us as if they know nothing about what we're doing. I tried my best to prepare and look at what's going on, and not only at the Uniformed Services University, but I am a little more familiar with the NIH Clinical Center because I did some work there a few years ago. But I am sure that some of the things I say, you will be doing already. But the culture, but you will probably be outliers. In fact, I'll actually talk a little bit about this, that I think you look very different from civilian PhD education, and I happen to think that's a good thing. And you'll understand why in just a little while. But I think it's time that the senior scientists in our field challenged our assumptions about the way we were trained and how fast we were trained and what we really learned and didn't learn. And I think we, most importantly, need to think about what does the nurse scientist of the future need, and not how did I make it the way I made it. It was a very different, I received my PhD in 1984, a very different world. There wasn't even, well, I guess there was a National Center for Nursing Research. No, there wasn't yet. So it was a very, very different world. And we have to figure this out because the younger generation deserves it. Healthcare is changing in everywhere. The civilians, and no matter, frankly, what happens in the next few years, the train has left the station. We have finally realized that we have the most expensive healthcare system in the world, and we give some of the poorest care. and we don't give it to everybody. So there's a lot of changes, and I have to say I'm proud about being at Duke. I'm at the tables that usually deans are not at, and strategizing for how can we deliver the best care to the most people in our catchment area, which is Durham County, and most importantly, measure whether we can improve their health or not. But all of these are affecting every single health system. Many of the rural hospitals are going to go out of business. There's estimates 30%. I think that's very serious. I think our country is, it has to consider ways, and we can do it. We actually have the technology to do that. We just have to make sure that we spend time trying to figure that out. And accountable care is, again, whether it's called the Accountable Care Act or not, it's with us. And in whatever form that takes, it will require that health delivery is accountable and it's accessible to everyone in our country. And that means we have to do, this is just sort of a list of characteristics of accountable care, and what I would argue is that nurse scientists know how to do the ones in red incredibly well. That's actually some of the things that we've been trained to do and have done for 30 years. So I think we are very well positioned, even with our silos of the academy and practice, to really get into this and move ourselves into this direction if we can see a way forward. I think the younger generation is figuring some of this out, but as their senior mentors, we have to help them to value that this knowledge as well as action on the part of them to develop research programs that really will meet the needs of patients. So what are the critical issues right now? Disparities in longevity that we have for a long time not addressed as clearly as I think we are now. Just to give you an example, if you live in the Duke University zip code, the average lifespan is 62.1 years. If you move 9 miles to the east towards Raleigh, but not into Raleigh, the average longevity is 88. 9 miles. That should take everybody's breath away because we're not the only ones. There are examples of that everywhere in our country. And we now know that much of that is related to social determinants of health. And we have got to start involving our health systems in delivering care in the communities where the people are in order to improve this. We need to continue to focus on healthy aging. There's a lot of emphasis in the civilian sector on, and I'm one of them, you know, one of the mid-level boomers, mid-age boomers, and we're all getting older, and there's a lot older than me. And we focus a lot on how we can address, you know, hip fractures and poor nutrition, et cetera. What we don't focus too much on anymore, or ever, is healthy aging. And we're going to have to do that. I'm very lucky that I have about 7 or 8 faculty who focus their research programs in the area of elders. We also have to look at a peaceful, dignified death. We have to get very serious about this because, frankly, healthcare is moving in that direction. We are getting better at making decisions about who gets, or when is it time to not continue care. When is the appropriate time? How to have conversations with patients so that when the conversation has to come, it's not a big surprise to everybody. It's never been a surprise to us, right? We can tell you the trajectory pretty much of most of these treatments, of these long-term and potentially terminal diseases, but it's always a surprise to the patients and families. Personalized precision medicine, and I was just talking with Dean Romano, and I know there's a lot of activity here. There certainly is on our university, and we are lucky to have a strong group of faculty who have been schooled in personalized medicine and genomics, and we have a strong group of medical faculty who also study in this area, and they are working very closely together. We also have to come up with innovative models of care. Now you might ask, what does that look like? One of my favorite grants at our school has been funded by the Hillman Foundation out of New York for 2 years. And it's a perfect example of the kind of research I think we need to continue to really focus on. And Duke University was realizing that they were sending 8 to 10 individuals with very complex medical issues home, discharging them, and then, of course, seeing them very soon after. And when somebody started to investigate, the fact is they were homeless. They couldn't go to the shelters because the shelters won't accept patients and can't accept patients with complex medical needs, with all kinds of ports and things like that. So one of our faculty partnered with Durham Connect, which is an agency in town, and they are working on this problem of how do you keep these patients from cycling back constantly, getting sicker and sicker. They are homeless. How do we connect them with the services? We used to say that belongs to the social workers. Well, no, that doesn't. That's part of the whole problem. And so that grant has been it's about halfway through now. I think it's a 3-year grant. And I think it's going to be the kind of, we'll learn a lot of lessons. We are already learning a lot of lessons of what it means to develop a nursing intervention and create a structure into the community. Data-driven decision-making. All of us tend to believe we use data. In fact, we generally don't. I was just reading a great article to make our decisions from the Harvard Business Review about one of the 3 reasons, and I won't remember the other 2 right now, but one of the reasons that diverse teams are so good at what they do is because the more diversity you have on a team, the more likely you are to use data to make decisions. It was a very interesting piece. Okay, let's talk a little bit about research funding trends. This is the way it kind of feels, right? If you've been in nursing research for the last 30 years, it feels like we're sort of being told, well, you just got to use those inner resources. There's only so much money, and that's essentially very true. So these are NIH awards as a whole from 2004 to 2013. And it's just used as an illustration to show what you've heard, right, is that NIH dollars are going down. We had more, not we in nursing, this is all of NIH, we had more PhDs produced around 2000 than ever before, and they were all competing for these grants. And when the doubling of the NIH budget happened. And there really isn't, especially when you look at the inflation factor, there was not an increase in the amount of money. So then hard decisions had to be made. And entire careers of PhD-prepared scientists were really, and frankly, at risk. Medical schools and industry have changed their models of using basic scientists. And it's been hard to watch. I've always worked in academic health centers, so I'm usually very close to the School of Medicine, and it is hard to watch the decisions that they're having to make. This is NINR data, and again, it looks pretty similar. Then obviously the amount of money is a lot lower, and the average award size traditionally had been just the same, if not a little bit higher, because of the intervention focus that we have in our discipline. And the success rates have not been exactly the same, but they're still, it's very, very competitive. And that means that we have to change substantially how we educate our PhD students. Just to give you some updated information, in 2016, the president's budget request was at $144 million. And I have to say, as part of many, many conversations in the discipline, we were highly encouraged by the different professional organizations to really come together in what we wanted to ask for. There were some of us, and I'll admit I was one of them, that wanted to ask for a lot more. And, but I was encouraged and persuaded that it was better to be unified than not, and so we did support $144 million request. Now that was the same as 2012, but 2.8% more than 2014. So depending on whether you see the glass half empty or half full, you can apply your philosophy to that. They are continuing the investment in research training for the next generation of PhD students, and I don't think that's ever been more important, ever. It's just really critical. This allows us to, and allows the students to really focus on their research and do it in a way that it puts them in a position where they have to think about priorities for their research. It's not just what they want to do, it's really what are the high priorities and how do I fit what I want to do into the priorities. And again, continuing the investment in intramural training. I know Anne's here, Anne Cashin and some of her team, but she was at Duke last week, so I learned a lot more than I used to know about intramural training, and I think the NINR should be incredibly proud of what's happening there. People watch us all the time, and watch nursing all the time, and the more that we can show people what we have to offer and what we do, the better. Try service nursing. I know you can't read this. It's a lot of small, but the important things to read are these, as you know, these are the 3 priorities: force health protection, nursing competence and practice, and leadership, ethics, and mentoring. And for me, when I communicated with Colonel Hatzfeld, the majority of the money that they have actually goes into force health protection. In fact, 48 of the grants that were funded this past year were in force health, 16% in nursing competence, and 3 in leadership, ethics, and mentoring. To me, that's there couldn't be, especially if you think about the fact that many of the things that accelerated treatment in the civilian sector came out of the military. We have a long history in that. So that's why it's absolutely critical to continue to put, I would think, most of the money there. There's currently 68 active awards, and 19 were awarded in 2016. Over the time, there was $100 million since 1992 that's been awarded by Tri-Service, and 6.7 million was awarded in 2015. That doesn't sound like a lot, but I looked at the funding that she sent me, and unlike some of the other funding sources, there was a small but incremental increase every year, and that is so important. So what's kind of the effect of all of this funding constriction that's happened over the last decade? This was out of the Chronicle of Higher Education, and the reality is that many scientists in many of the medical schools, and that's where most of the research actually happens in basic science, they were abandoning the areas of study, these affects jobs. We don't think a lot about research producing jobs, but it clearly does. And staff members, and certainly the next generation of scientists. And how does it affect universities? You've all seen the headlines. There's a lot of tensions going on. PhD students have to learn how to teach. Even though only 50% of them actually go into academia, there's so many more options for nurses who get PhDs anymore. There's a lot. I was dean at Indiana University for 10 years, a large state, stellar school in the top 20. And I can tell you it was constantly an issue to provide resources for students and faculty. And it was because the state appropriations are going down all the time. And there's a lot of different mandates about raises, et cetera, and your hands are tied about how you raise money and things like that. So it was a constant. Duke is a wonderful place, and it does have more resources. And I can mobilize those resources in ways that I find important to develop the profession and to develop the science. Here's where we need to start paying more attention on our PhD faculties and our PhD students. Our students have got to be trained differently. They have got to, our apprentice model of coming in, and schools vary. I do a lot of PhD school reviews, and they vary in 2 ways. One is you have to be an exact match with a faculty member there, which is the apprentice model. And the other, you can come in with your own ideas. I personally do not think either one is serving us well. I just think we have to, as a country, there's 131 PhD programs. Of that, I'd say maybe 30 have significant funding of their research programs. Those 30 need to decide just what exactly, and I think we need to come together. And I've talked to some of the deans of the privates and the large state schools about this. We need to sort of push this. Deans are not supposed to, as I say at home, mess with curriculum. But I can throw ideas out. And I really do think we're going to have to figure ways that our students are much more schooled in, for instance, big data strategies and electronic health records. We have a phenomenal health record at Duke, and how to, and I won't say we're alone in this, but how you actually query that data and use it and then mobilize it to improve health is certainly a question. But if our students are not on some of those teams and are not studying with some of those individuals, and yes, I realize it's not exactly related to their dissertation, but there's too much focus on just the dissertation in every school I've been at. We need to reel in, and that's one place I think the military has an advantage. You come into your PhD programs as leaders. When people ask me, where did I learn my leadership? I learned it in the military. And not to say I haven't been to some, other things, because I have. And I've learned a lot of hard lessons as a leader. And I guess the good news there is I've learned. But I learned two things. One is I was supposed to take care of the people that worked with me. That was just a really clear message. And the second thing was I was an officer first and a nurse second. And I can tell you that was hard for me to accept at 22 years of age. I was married to a captain in the Signal Corps who kept reinforcing that message at home. Marianne, I'm sorry, but you are a first lieutenant. I'm like, no, I'm really a nurse. No, yeah, fine. That's your functional role, which it was just really a shock. But I had wonderful mentors. Lieutenant Colonel Colvey is just somebody who spent so many years trying to shape me and did a good job. But I really did learn a lot about leadership in the military. So you bring that to your PhD programs. Many of our PhD students have never been in a leadership role, and they are afraid of them. They don't know how to look at their inner strengths and use those. So we have to spend a lot of time working with that and with them. So I love this. When I was on the council, advisory council at NINR, Bob Kaplan came and talked to us about the next generation of knowledge. And I just love his question, how can we best use our resources, and I put in quotes intellectual, and I'd argue social talent, in the universities, as well as other sectors like the military, like industry, et cetera, to improve public health. This is the central question. We should, especially if you're not in a basic science, and I'd argue even if you are, but if you're not, that's the kind of research you should be doing, is improving the health of citizens, individuals in our country. Because the goal is really to create and translate new models of generating knowledge, and most importantly, to be useful to society. That is why we have the advantage that we have. We've been given, anybody in this room has been given a lot of advantages to make a difference. So where's nursing and our knowledge in all this? Well, I think we're a little bit stuck. This is a paper by Mitchell and colleagues over at NIH. And it was a great paper in Nursing Outlook, of course. And they actually took a look at all the theoretical models for translation. And I think we've really gotten ourselves, we've always been in the early translation, late translation. We think we're doing dissemination, but we're not. At least not those of us in the academies that I work in. Because our dissemination, to get promoted, people figure out pretty quickly. It's all about the journals and the impact factor and their own H factor and how they can get in as many publications as possible. And not really even having to think about, okay, what impact has this made on health of people? And when writing a lay article on your program of, my program of research was in pediatric pain and child health. And when I wrote an article, I'll never forget, for the Chicago Parent on how to help your child in pain, I got so much comment, and I won't say it was really super positive. I mean, I couldn't understand it. I mean, thought I was doing, don't put that on your CV. Well, it is on my CV, and it is staying on my CV. Because the people that I did research with, the participants, I could see their need for that knowledge. And they, frankly, didn't read nursing research or any of the other journals. They were reading the Chicago Parent on the weekend. And Mitchell et al. Talked about what are the translational science models. And I really think we have to, we see, too many times I think we see the research project itself as an end, it's a means to an end, and we need to reframe that. We need to think about, okay, you're in the middle of this grant, but what's the end game here? And we don't do enough of that coaching with our young people. So how are you going to use this knowledge? And how's it going to impact long term? Instead, we talk to them about, okay, what's your next study? Well, of course they have to have a next study. If as a dean, they're spending half their time getting research grants and implementing them, then of course they're going to get a research grant. It's just a matter of like when and how quick and for how long. But they have to think broader than that. What stops us? I think it's in the organizational and cultural beliefs of the academy. I took this picture. That was one of my awesome trips internationally. We do a lot of work in capacity building all over the world. But I think there are great walls between practice, between research, and between teaching. We are still, as a discipline, not necessarily at Duke, but we are still thinking about teaching for our PhD students as something they have to get through, as opposed to something they're going to be spending their entire career doing along with their research. Practice, some of them have some very connected research programs in our field to practice, others do not. And I think that's a function of the separation between the academy in nursing and practice. Dean Romano and I were just were at AACN, where they focused on, they actually had us all bring our CNOs, our vice presidents for nursing, for 2 different sessions. There's now a whole movement on the future of academic nursing and how critically important it is in academic nursing to partner with your health systems. And I know she was sharing with me a lot of the discussions that are going on at the NIH Clinical Center. You know, together, as Mary Ann Fuchs and I say, at Duke, it's really, we're much stronger when we're together. And I learned that when I was at IU, and we had a very strong service practice partnership that was research, education, and service. And the Dean of Medicine, who has very good colleagues with, Craig Brader, said to me one time, you know, I might take you on about some things, and I might take Linda Everett on about others, but I would never take the both of you to go on together. Like, yep, good, we're doing our job. So what has been, and still is, our lens and value structure for research success and productivity. Now, I know, I am very well aware, and I would say this is kudos to the military. This is not your world. I bet you're sitting there thinking, I really wish it was, right? But it's not serving us well. So it's 8 to 10 years of development before one can be an independent researcher. If you count the PhD program, the average PhD program is 4.1 years. Then they're encouraged to do a postdoc, another 2 years. And then they come on a faculty, and we have to give them release time for 3 years. So this is really drawn out. It is a tremendous investment in an individual. And I would love to believe that every one of those individuals is successful and effective at getting programs of research funded and off the ground, but the reality is they are not. It's a linear trajectory, pilot, focus, bigger pilot, focus, keep the, just keep it focused, keep your research program focused. What happens with that, and I've watched this, I was on 2 study sections over 12 years, what happens is as the person becomes more experienced in their career, they're still focused, and guess what? Priorities change, and people have a very difficult time changing. Because they've been told, the mantra has always been, you must do deep dives, you must stay in that deep dive, you must never come up for air, or you'll never be successful. We cannot continue to tell them that. They're also protected time for years. Now that's getting much less. I just actually did some benchmarking on this, and it turns out that the schools, many of the schools are giving, even the privates, are giving a certain number of years, 3, let's say, where they only teach 1 course a semester instead of 2. And they have to see increased productivity. But those schools also have some pretty strong infrastructures. Like our infrastructure for research, we have an 11 staff in our Center for Nursing Research. It is it really allows our faculty to focus on the science and to get funded. And again, they've been told just have a singular focus, move from description to then intervention. When I was, I never had enough patients for, anyway, I started, my first R01 was an intervention. And I piloted the intervention beforehand, but I was never a big one on taking my time and doing the description. That was in my ear all the time. People told me, and all I could see was children were suffering, and they needed some help. And I struggled with that. I struggled a lot, but I was successful getting funded and testing those models of pain, cognitive behavior models for children in pain. But would I say that was the best way to do it? I don't know if it was the best way, but I did learn a lot along the way, and I was effective at developing and testing these models. But now it's, no, you got to do the descriptive first, and you just have to move along, and we just seriously don't have that kind of time. And translation, if it comes at all, comes very late. And why is that important? Well, there's a lot of wicked problems out there to study. And what's a wicked problem? That we live with them every day. If you're in practice, you live with these. You see patients with these every day. They're challenging to identify and define. Obesity's one. I mean, the myriad problems that people show up with that are directly related to their obesity and lack of fitness, and that have to, then you keep chasing that disease, are just amazing. There's no real easy solution. That's why it's a wicked problem. People have been trying to solve things. They've been trying different things. It's not because we haven't cared or haven't tried, but they're just not easy. And sometimes the solutions range from better to worse. Everyone is unique, and every wicked problem is associated with some of the others, especially in health, but they're unique in and of themselves. And once you try to solve it, it kind of morphs into something else. So how do we train nurse scientists to study these kinds of wicked problems? Well, we give them a lot more latitude. We focus more on innovation and creativity than on having all the right trajectory, having your foot one in front of the other. That's just not going to fit for tomorrow's world. We have to focus a lot on how do our PhD students use their creative juices, become innovative, work with other disciplines. And I mean even outside of nursing, I mean medicine. We've always pretty much been colleagues with medicine, but we need to get into the schools of engineering and policy and environments. Those are some of the ones we work with at Duke. Global health, some students are really attracted to global health, and they end up being our most innovative students. Because when you're, as you know, you've all served somewhere other than the US probably, you have to be pretty innovative. And you have to get down to basics when you're trying to solve problems in international settings. Because teams will have one goal, and that is to look at data, look at knowledge, try to figure out what their performance is and how they can improve it to improve health. Now, this is the question to ask, not only how many of our PhD students are learning about these big areas, but how many of us are skilled in them? That's probably the bigger question. How many associate and full professors have gone to take a genomics course and have done research using those concepts and those techniques? These are important questions for us to focus on. And if we're not doing it, why are we not doing it? The really good news, however, is I know several doctoral students across the country who are studying some really important and innovative models. And there are programs out there that support our students. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, you now have come around to the military's way of thinking. You've got 3 years in and out. And you know what? It works. I had an email conversation yesterday with one of our PhD students who's a Robert Wood Johnson Fellow and is now looking for postdocs and is constantly asked, she said, how could you have possibly learned anything in 3 years? And so I wrote her back a few things and I said, and you know what? Most of those people know me, so tell them I finished in 3 years. I didn't learn everything, but I learned enough. And then I learned a lot more after I finished. So what does a young nurse scientist of the future look like? They're boundary spanners. They don't, they don't stay in isolation. They don't, and they learn to integrate their role. I taught pediatrics and I did pediatric research. That sort of helped out a lot. I wouldn't have known how to teach anything else, so that was very fortuitous. That was my passion, though. I've just been so lucky to have that passion that was actually, the military made me be a pediatric nurse, and I can say that with all truth because they told me to show up there instead of psych mental health, which I thought I wanted to be. And Colonel Fraser just said, you're in the Army now, show up and be 8. And I did, and when she came back 3 months later to send me to psych, I said, oh no, I'm not leaving here. I love this. So, I tell my students, don't ever kind of disregard. You will be forced, in your opinion, to go down one path, and it may work out well for you, may not. The future nurse scientist needs to learn to find coaches and colleagues in many places and not just one advisor. And that's my constant message to them, is you talk to everybody. And then don't tell me you're confused and you're not sure where to go. You know what? You're going to have a PhD. You are a leader, whether you like it or not. You're in that few numbers of people who have a graduate degree in nursing, so just learn to lead. Well, I need to go to a course. Well, that might help you a little, but you've got to have your heart in leading. And let's see. So are we coaching on, I know for a fact that we don't have a course in leadership in our PhD program. I don't think I know of many programs. We have a lot of methods, a lot of statistics, a lot of that. And if they take the teaching courses, if they take the global health courses, well, that's really good. That's great if they can do that. That's where our focus needs to change. First of all, you can take 25 courses and methods, and the methods are evolving constantly. And so that's not, you need a basic foundation, and then you're going to go from there. And what do we teach them about politics? And I don't mean the kind of politics we've been living with, but the forces that they're going to have to deal with negotiating science, negotiating their research program, negotiating how to teach, negotiating senior faculty when they take a position. What are we teaching them about that? How to get the best first position, not because the university is prestigious, but because it's the best fit for themselves. And how not to be invisible. We just gotta, I sit at tables where women are still rare. And when they are, unfortunately, they're sort of celebrated as if they're, unique, which they're unique only because they're rare in that particular place. But I got to tell you, the ones that I will follow are the ones that speak up and ask questions and give their opinion. That we are too often silenced when we are in diverse groups of people, and we need to speak up. And frankly, we need to teach our young scientists, and I'm assuming officers, that they not only need to lead teams, but they need to know how to be a good team player. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not a good team player on occasion. So this will take an army of all of us who are senior or old, however you want to sort of claim that. We have to remember my PhD is not even in nursing. I tease people about this all the time. And yet I've always been able to see the value of nursing knowledge and theories. I was like such a proponent of nursing theories. I have a PhD in child development. I saw the value of theories in child development. And by the way, they didn't give us any choice as to whether we were going to test a child development theory. We just did it. We need to find our voice individually and collectively, because that's how our profession has always been. We've spoken out for people who need improved health. That goes back 200-300 years. We have got to get back to our roots. And whether we're in the C-suite, where most of our vice presidents are, or whether we're a staff nurse at the bedside, or whether we're a dean or a faculty member, everybody in nursing has got to learn to look at their own strengths and then to lead in whatever area seems appropriate. Because frankly, not because of the power, not because of the salary, but because it will. I find leadership to be, it empowers me too when I can empower others, make a difference. So these are the kind of transformative leaders. Actually, Finari writes a lot about this. She's in the military, and I found a couple of her papers. And I think she's in the military. Yeah, right? Anybody know that? Okay. These are really, it's all over the literature. The one thing that I don't see on here that probably comes closest is our authentic. It's hard to be direct. It's hard to be kind of ask the hard questions. And yet, what I have found is people always appreciate that. They'd rather have the questions asked and start the discussion than have everybody in hallway conversations. So when you're a leader, and it is easier to ask the question, I've got a lot of really good advice over my career, but here's one of my favorites. Angela McBride, the dean that was prior to me at Indiana and an icon in the field, said, you know, Marion, when you're at those tables and you're kind of like either the only woman or the only nurse or whatever, you might sort of start to say something like, you know, I wouldn't be doing my job as dean of school of nursing if I didn't remind everybody that, or I didn't ask why we don't. And you know what? People don't take offense at it. It's like, well, she's doing her job. You know, she just asked. We don't want to answer that, but I guess we have to because she's just doing her job. It works like a charm. Nobody gets mad. Nobody kind of sideswipes it. They're like, oh, yeah, we got to help her out, you know, because she's doing her job. Whatever it takes. And these are just some things that I have found to be incredibly helpful when I'm in difficult situations, and I'm in them quite, not every day, but I'd say at least a couple, 3 times a week, whether it's faculty to faculty or student to faculty or me to other deans or, you know, we are always trying to meet our own agendas, and there's always some level of different opinions, and we have to come to some solution. So I try to focus on, okay, if I'm going to walk through this, what results do I want to see? And what I found most important about that is when I can say that to other people, here's what I would like to see out of this. I know it's going to be a hard conversation. They really seem to appreciate that. It sort of diffuses a lot of the conversation. And most importantly, and I had a conversation last week, which was very, very difficult, and I had to say to the person, look, I cannot do this because I have core values, and they happen to involve, one of them happens to be integrity, and I cannot do what you're asking me to do and sleep at night. So I'm not going to do it, and I'm sorry. I'm sure there's somebody who might do that for you. And I don't know if they accepted it long term, but they seemed to accept it right then. And again, if you're a leader, this is one of the things I distinctly remember learning in the military is focusing on the collective good and not on my own fears. And I'm one of those, I'm not highly anxious, but I'm always second guessing what I'm gonna do, what I've done, you know, just one of those things. And so I have those fears, and I have to, when I can say I'm making this decision because it's for the collective good of the school, it's much easier for me, much easier. And so those are just a few. This is one of my favorite editorials I wrote, and I really think I actually think we have to think about this in society, right? But I wrote this in response to the APRN initiatives on a national level. And I'll just say what I got to say. So the APRN groups, all 21 of the specialties or however many there are, they sort of came together as a force, and that was really a good thing. But they didn't come together with academe, the very people who have to prepare advanced practice nurses. And they've just said to us, you must do this, you must do that. Well, frankly, there's a cost issue comes with each of those you have tos, and many of the schools cannot afford them. And so how does that get us what we want in the long run? So they're going to close programs, they're going to cut down on the number of students, et cetera. So how is that going to help us in the long run to meet the needs of the country for more advanced practice nurses? Why are we having these kind of decisions made in isolation? So I wrote this article about collective genius. There's no right answers to this. There's no answers that would satisfy both groups, but we have to have those difficult conversations. So collective genius, it was not my concept. If you read the editorial, you'll see the original concept and where it came from. But basically, it's that people come together and share their bias, their perspective, because we have a common agenda or a common goal. But it is hard stuff. Creative abrasion, lots of conflict, lots of discourse and debate. And in our case, we need to talk about what graduate students really need, not how did I get my PhD and how did I become a successful funded researcher. Those days are over. It takes a whole different, many of us who are seniors say, probably shouldn't say this too loud to those of you from NIH, but when we were funded 20 years ago, our grant that was funded 20 years ago was cutting edge. It would not be funded now. So that kind of humbles you, like, gosh, you really need to, and almost everybody does that, continue to hone themselves. But we need to have these conversations, and we need to move fast. I know you think the military moves slow, but I got to tell you, academia is even slower. It is like forever slow. So we have to move quickly to make curricular changes that will, again, meet the needs of the students and meet the needs of society, not meet the needs of the faculty. And then we have to come to some creative resolution with our partners. It's all about partnership now. Just like you can't walk into a community and do an intervention and not talk to the people living in that, not only talk to them, you have to involve them in creating the intervention if they're ever going to, if there's any impact to be made long term, and keep them with you the whole time as equal partners. Well, we have to do the same thing when we're trying to develop new initiatives that we think are going to solve it. So it means all of us as leaders have to embrace new thinking, create a certain sense of urgency, and again, these partnerships. Most importantly, I decided a few weeks ago that I was no longer going to continue to try to create a future that I was not going to live in. So every time I go to talk to students, I'm going to be very careful to say to them, look, you have to take my advice from whom it's coming. Yeah, I've had a lot of experience, and I'll share that with you, but it's not going to be your experience. So you need to think about being flexible, soaking everything you can in, being mentored by people from all different walks of life, and maybe mentoring is even too strong a term, coached, learn, be self-reflective. You have your own world to live in. And it's my world too, because I'm living in it, but it's not the one that I became successful in. So here's some, I'm just going to close with a few things. I love these quotes, and as you know, Vernice Ferguson, if there's anybody from the VA, was a leader for many, many years. I love hers. Be there, by hook or crook, I was always in the inner circle. You position your place so you can facilitate nursing to its fullest. And Angela is still very active in the field, serving on hospital boards, and she talks about the central task at hand is to shape healthcare, exercise power of authority, and create a vision for the future. They cannot do that without nurses. They just simply can't. But it's up to us to find our voice. And Tulsi Gabbard, who's in Gabbard, who's actually in the Congress, yeah, this is true. Learn to just, well, most of the time, I didn't even raise my hand. Somebody just told me to do something. So I was like, okay. But the important message I learned out of that is, all right, I really had a lot of respect for this Colonel Colvey, and I said, well, she must think I know what I'm doing, or she wouldn't tell me to do it. That was just, I didn't think I could do it. I would never volunteered for it. But she thought I could do it, so I did it. And guess what? I did it. About killed myself doing those things, but I did it. This is a slide that needs to come off the recording, by the way, because I didn't take this picture. So to what end? This is to what end? Is, in your case, the soldiers, the sailors, the airmen, the families, the caregivers that you serve in turn. And that's why we do all this. That's why our science has got to be connected to them and to their lives and to improving their health. And as a final statement, the Women's Memorial, if you're not registered and are not putting it on your donation list every year, please do. I have no connection with it except I do donate every year. Because they're in, this is a memorial that's absolutely dedicated to women who have served. And they are struggling a little bit. And it's a beautiful memorial. It is our legacy, without question. And so I am part of a group that is very concerned about this, and I think rightfully so. So I just thought I'd mention that, since I have such a captive audience of people who should care. That's it. So can we take questions? Yeah?